My name is Linda Monroe. I'm a 57-year-old single mother, former teacher, and a woman who never thought she'd have to beg for a seat at her own daughter's wedding. But here I was sitting in silence, staring at an email that felt like a slap, wrapped in politeness. Hey Mom, I think it's best you watch the wedding via live stream. It'll be easier for everyone that way. No explanation, no conversation, just those cold lines. I read them over and over, wondering what everyone meant. Was I now a stranger to my own blood? I raised her alone after her father walked out when she was barely 5. I held her through asthma attacks, celebrated every science fair, and stayed up countless nights helping her rehearse for debates and college interviews. I gave her everything I had, my time, my savings, my dreams, my youth, and now, I was being given a live stream link. I didn't cry, not at first. I just sat there, numb, clutching the edges of my kitchen table as if it would stop the world from spinning. I thought maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there was a reason. Maybe this was a mistake. So I called her, no answer. I messaged her on every app she uses. Sweetheart, is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? I'll make it right. Just talk to me. See, no replies. That silence was louder than any scream she could have given me. Days passed, then weeks. The wedding date crept closer like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Friends started asking, "Are you excited?" I smiled, lied, said I was helping with the decor, even though I hadn't been asked to do a thing. I even bought a dress in case she changed her mind. A navy blue gown with lace sleeves, simple, elegant, something a mother could be proud to wear. It hung in my closet untouched like a prayer stitched in fabric. And the night before the wedding, I sat alone on my porch, staring up at the stars that she and I used to name together when she was a little girl. Back when I was her world. You used to call me your hero, I whispered to the sky. What changed? And then something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet, but something like resolve. I decided if I wasn't invited to her wedding, I'd still show up for myself. Because I deserved to know the truth. I deserved to see the child I raised walk down the aisle, even if I had to stand in the shadows. The morning of the wedding came like a whisper laced with thunder. I woke up before the sun, heart pounding, hands trembling as I reached for that navy blue dress. I ironed it slowly, carefully, as if I were smoothing out the ink stitched between the threads. I pinned my hair up the way she used to love when she was little, twisting it into a soft bun with the pearl clip she gave me on my 50th birthday. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at the woman looking back at me. She didn't look broken. She looked like someone who had survived storms and still chose softness. I didn't drive to the venue. That would have been too obvious, too invasive. I had a different plan. One she didn't see coming. I called a friend who worked in event coordination, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but someone who owed me a favor. I need to be at the wedding, I said plainly, not just near enough to see her walk down the aisle. There was a pause on the line, then a sigh. Give me 20 minutes. She arranged for me to assist in the back garden setup, under a different name, no questions asked. I wore gloves, a mask, even a staff lanyard. No one noticed me as I moved folding chairs and arranged white roses into metal vases. But I noticed everything. I saw my daughter arrive. She looked radiant, glowing in a satin gown that shimmered like dew under morning light. And yet, I couldn't feel proud. I could only feel distant. I saw her greet the groom's parents with warm hugs and laughter, saw her pose for pictures with friends and bridesmaids who knew my name but wouldn't dare meet my eyes. Not one person asked where her mother was. Not one looked around like something was missing. That's when it hit me. Not just the pain of exclusion, but the weight of erasure. She hadn't just left me out of her wedding. She'd edited me out of her story. The realization folded into me like paper on fire. Quiet, destructive, inevitable. I stayed behind the hedges as the ceremony began, clutching a clipboard I didn't need, pretending to check flower arrangements while every word from the officiant stabbed a little deeper. Today we celebrate not just a union but a journey, he said, smiling. I wanted to scream. What about the woman who started that journey with her? My daughter looked so serene, so confident. as if nothing, no one was missing. And maybe to her, I wasn't. Maybe I had been fading from her life long before this wedding, and I just hadn't noticed. Or maybe I noticed everything and chose not to believe it. I remembered the birthday she canceled last minute, the calls that went unanswered, the way she started saying Linda instead of Mom in front of her college friends. It wasn't sudden storm, it was erosion. Silent, slow, devastating. As they exchanged vows, I stepped back, away from the crowd, away from the pain, and walked toward the reception tent where the staff was gathering. I didn't belong out there, but I didn't belong here either. So I stood in between, uninvited in every direction. One of the servers asked if I was okay. I nodded, lied again. Just allergies, I said, wiping away tears. I pretended were from the pollen. I almost left then, almost took the back gate, and disappeared like they wanted me to. But something in me refused. I stayed, not to ruin her day, not to cause a scene, but because I had one final thing to do. One final moment that would change everything, not for revenge, but for clarity. I walked quietly to the guest book table, while everyone was distracted by champagne and toasts. I signed my name, just 3 words beneath it. I was here. I didn't expect her to notice. I didn't expect anyone to read the book until the wedding was over, until the lights were packed up and the tables stripped clean. But fate has a strange sense of timing. As I turned to leave, she walked toward the guest book herself. I froze, hidden just behind the decorative curtain near the catering setup. She opened it casually, flipping through pages of congratulations and glitter-penned wishes. Then she stopped. Her hand hovered above the ink of my name. Her shoulders stiffened. I saw it in her face, that flicker of disbelief. The way her jaw the breath she held for too long. She didn't say a word, not to her husband, not to anyone. But I knew she felt it, the ghost of me in that moment, standing inches away but miles apart. I walked away then. I didn't wait for her to turn around, didn't crave a confrontation or a miracle reconciliation. I just needed her to know. Back at home, I sat in my quiet kitchen, removed a pearl clip from my hair, and placed it on the table next to the untouched wedding card I had once planned to mail. I thought I'd feel shattered, but oddly, I felt lighter. Not because the pain disappeared, but because I had faced it. For the first time, I didn't hide from the reality that my daughter had chosen a life where I didn't fit, and maybe it wasn't malicious. Maybe it was her way of coping, or reinventing herself, but it still hurt. It still made me question the value of every bedtime story, every homemade costume, every late-night pep talk. And yet, I wouldn't trade a second of it. Because being her mother wasn't about receiving an invitation. It was about giving everything without needing applause. The following week, I got a text from an unknown number. It was her. Just 2 words, "You came." I stared at the screen for so long I forgot to blink. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether to reply or let the silence speak for me. I didn't know what she expected me to say. Yes, I came. Because I raised you? Yes, I came. Because I still love you even when you don't want me. In the end, I typed a single word, always. No bubbles appeared. No reply came. And that was okay. Because sometimes the closure we need doesn't come from conversations. It comes from choosing our own peace. I started doing things I hadn't in years. I picked my paintbrushes again. I signed up for a local poetry group at the library. I stopped checking my phone every 10 minutes waiting for her to reach out. Instead, I started reaching back into myself. There's a strange beauty in learning how to mother your own heart, in remembering that you're still worthy even when you're not invited to the milestones, even when your title as mom feels like it's been revoked without warning. People think motherhood ends when your child moves out, but it doesn't. It just changes shape, sometimes into grief, sometimes into grace. And I chose grace. One afternoon, while watering the plants on my porch, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned and saw her. No wedding dress, no camera crew, just my daughter in jeans and a tired expression. We stood there in silence, wind rustling the leaves between us like a translator we didn't know how to use. She didn't say hello. She didn't say sorry. She just asked, "Can I come in?" I nodded, stepped aside, let her enter the house she hadn't visited in over a year. It still smelled of lavender and lemon polish, just like it did when she was growing up. She paused by the bookshelf, her fingers trailing across the spines like she was remembering something softer, something before the silence. I offered her tea, just like I always did. She nodded. I could see the weight in her shoulders lighten just a little. We sat at the kitchen table, steam curling between us like a question. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know how to tell you everything, so I didn't tell you anything." Her voice cracked at the edges, and I felt my own eyes sting. "I thought if I kept you away, it would make it easier," she said. "For me, for everyone." I didn't ask who everyone was anymore. I wasn't fighting for a place at a table that didn't want me. I just wanted the truth. "Was I ever invited?" I asked softly. She looked down, then shook her head. "No," she whispered. I knew what I was doing. I closed my eyes, let the ache roll through me like a quiet wave. But I didn't drown in it. I nodded. "Thank you for telling me." She looked surprised, maybe she expected anger, guilt, or a dramatic scene. But I didn't have the energy for theatrics. Only healing. "I thought you'd hate me," she said. I smiled, a small tired smile. "Sweetheart, I could never hate you, but I needed to learn how to love myself again without waiting for your permission." She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. Not as a mother waiting in the shadows, but as a woman who had weathered storms without ever slamming a door. "I wasn't trying to punish you," she said, voice breaking. "I just felt like you'd hold me back from being who I needed to be." That hurt more than the email ever did. Not because it wasn't true, but because maybe somewhere along the way I had made her feel smaller instead of safe. I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct her. I just nodded, accepting her truth and mine at the same time. "We can't go back," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But we can start where we are." She reached across the table, hesitant, unsure, and placed her hand on mine. That simple touch cracked something open between us. The silence we'd carried, the bitterness and the distance, it started to melt. Not disappear, but soften. Like snow after a long winter. We talked for hours, about her fears, her husband, her new life. She told me she didn't want to disappoint him, that he didn't understand our bond, our history. He thought, "You were controlling," she said quietly. "Too intense." I laughed softly, not bitterly. "I am intense," I said. "But only because I loved you with everything I had." She smiled, her eyes wet, and said, "I know that now." It wasn't a full healing, not yet. But it was a thread, a beginning. The next time she visited, she brought photos, real ones, printed, glossy, with fingerprints at the corners. One of her in her wedding dress, smiling in the garden. One of her holding hands with her new husband under fairy lights. One of the two of them dancing, blurry from motion and joy. "I want you to have these," she said, placing the envelope on my kitchen table like it was an offering. I picked them up slowly, afraid to smudge something sacred. "You look happy," I whispered. "I was," she said, "but I kept looking for you in the crowd." My throat tightened. "Even though you told me not to come. Especially then," she answered. It was the first time I saw her regret unfold without shame. And I didn't shame her either. I reached into the drawer and pulled out something I had kept folded for weeks. A letter I'd written the day after her email but never sent. I handed it to her. "You can read it later," I said. She did, that night. And at 2:03 a.m., I received a message that simply said, "I'm sorry for erasing you. You were never invisible to me. I just didn't know how to carry both your love and my fear at once." I read that message under my blanket with tears on my cheeks, and for the first time in years I felt seen again, not just as her mother but as a woman with a name, history, and a heart too large to lock out. The next morning, we went for coffee like we used to. No scripts, no tension. just stories and laughter. It felt like breathing again after holding it in for too long. Weeks passed, then months. And slowly, gently, our bond began to stitch itself back together. Not with perfection but with presence. She started calling more often, not out of obligation but curiosity. She asked about my garden, my painting, even my poetry group. She remembered my world existed too, and that, more than any apology, made me feel like I mattered again. One rainy afternoon, she showed up with a box. Inside was her wedding album. "I want you to add the last page," she said. I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" She slid over a photo of me, one I didn't know existed. I was standing near the tent that day, clipboard in hand, half hidden behind a curtain. My face was turned slightly, but it was clearly me. "One of the photographers caught it," she said. When I saw it, I broke down. My hands trembled as I held the image. Proof that I had been there. That even from the margins, my love had been visible. "Will you write something on the back?" she asked. I nodded, too choked up to speak. On the back of the photo I wrote, "Even when you couldn't see me, I was loving you. From every corner." She read it, pressed the photo into the album, and closed it gently like she was closing a wound. That night, she stayed for dinner. We cooked together like we used to, measuring laughter and silence in equal spoonfuls. The table was set with old dishes and new memories. We ate slowly, as if chewing softened time itself. She told me stories I had never heard about her fears before the wedding. How she almost called me 100 times but didn't know what to say. She confessed that her therapist had asked, "What's the worst that could happen if you invited her?" And she couldn't answer. "I was scared you'd see me as weak," she said. "That you'd be disappointed I wasn't the woman you raised." I reached across the table, holding her hand like I used to when she had nightmares. "I raised you to be honest with yourself," I said. "Not perfect." Her tears fell silently but her grip tightened. "I needed that," she whispered. After dessert, she wandered through the house like a museum of her own childhood. She paused at the piano, touched the keys, smiled at the way they still remembered her fingers. "Do you still play?" she asked. "Sometimes," I replied. She sat beside me and for the first time in years, we played together. The melody wasn't flawless. It didn't need to be. It was real, raw, and filled with everything we hadn't said. As the notes faded, she rested her head on my shoulder just like when she was a little girl falling asleep during lullabies. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she murmured. "I almost did," I admitted. But then I remembered mothers don't quit, we wait. The next morning, she left a note on the fridge before heading out. "See you next Sunday, Mom." I stood there for a long time holding that little paper square like it was gold. Not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. I was Mom again. Not Linda, not the woman on the outside looking in. Just Mom. And that was more healing than any apology. She came every Sunday after that. Sometimes we baked. Sometimes we just sat in silence and drank tea. But each visit sewed a little more thread into the torn fabric between us. One afternoon she brought her husband. He was nervous, polite, but stiff. I could tell he wasn't sure what version of me he'd be meeting. The bitter mother, the betrayed woman, the one with too many boundaries. I gave him none of those. I offered him warmth, not for his sake, but for hers. We talked about art, travel, music, and slowly he relaxed. As he helped himself to a second slice of pie, he said, "I've heard so much about you." I smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "Not all of it good, I bet." He chuckled. She was angry but never unloving. That stuck with me. Anger isn't the opposite of love, it's proof it existed. And through all the distance, the pain, the silence, love had never left. One evening, after they'd both gone home, I found a little envelope tucked beneath the piano lid. It was sealed with a wax stamp, something old-fashioned and thoughtful. Inside was a handwritten letter from my daughter. No email, no text, just ink on paper, the way she used to write me notes when she was a teenager. "Dear Mom," it began, I don't know how we got here and I don't know if I deserve this chance again. But thank you for not closing the door even when I slammed it. My eyes blurred after that. The letter was full of confessions. She had been depressed for months before the wedding. Overwhelmed by expectations, afraid of repeating mistakes from our past, worried I'd see her differently if she admitted she didn't have it all together. I thought, if I pushed you away, I could finally prove I was independent, she wrote. But all I did was prove how much I still needed you. She thanked me for showing up, for not begging to be let in, but making sure she knew I was always there. That silent act, it broke something in me, she wrote. It made me realize that love doesn't always knock loud, it sometimes waits in quiet corners until we're ready to hear it. I folded the letter, placed it in my jewelry box with the clip she once gave me, and closed the lid gently, like protecting a sacred memory. That night, I didn't cry from pain. I cried from release. Years of holding, waiting, wondering if I had failed as a mother. They flowed out like rain finally free to fall. I knew then that I had done something right. Maybe not everything, but enough. Weeks turned into months and those Sunday visits became a tradition again. Not because we were trying to fix everything, but because we were simply choosing each other, one moment at a time. She started calling me with silly updates. Burned dinners, new plants, arguments over what color to paint the living room. Life things. Normal things. The kind I once feared I'd never be included in again. On my birthday, she surprised me with a dinner party at her home. Her home, my name finally spoken again with warmth inside its walls. She toasted me in front of her friends, her in-laws, her husband. To my mother, she said, raising a glass, who taught me that forgiveness is the quietest form of courage. I didn't expect to cry, but I did, not out of sadness, but awe. Somehow, without forcing it, we'd found our way back to love. A new kind of love, not built on obligation or proximity, but truth. She wasn't my little girl anymore. She was a woman who had hurt and healed and chosen to return. And I wasn't just her mother. I was her anchor, her mirror, and finally, her friend. One night, before leaving, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on the us." I couldn't see yet. I whispered back, "Thank you for finally looking." As I watched her drive away, headlights fading into the night, I felt something settle in me. Not peace exactly, but presence. The knowing that I had been both erased and rediscovered, and that I had survived both. And sometimes, that's enough.